Hi everyone, welcome to the Ecosystem Innovation video series. Today, we're going to be talking about sustainability. Sustainability is at the forefront of almost every conversation, and for very good reason. In the procurement space, SAP Ariba has been driving this with the procurement with a purpose messaging and through our supplier risk product. It's a very pivotal function for SAP, and listening to Christian Klein recently, sustainability is at the core of what SAP has as part of its strategy going forward. Now, we're going to be continue driving that from a software solution perspective, but actually the ecosystem has already built some very neat and integrated solutions. So we're going to talk to our friends from PwC today, who've built a really great little product called Sustainability Tracker. And we're going to talk to Jan Joachim Herrmann and Eva Stolper Falkenthal, who are going to take us through the app and give us some insight as to how you can track sustainability within procurement directly from their tool. Hi, Jan. Hi, Eva. Glad to have you here today.
Hi.
Hello. Thanks for the invitation again.
No worries.
Thank you.
No worries. So, hey, Eva, why don't you take us through the reasons that this is important for procurement?
Yeah, absolutely, Mo. I'm delighted to be in today's video for you. And well, basically what is happening actually currently in the world, we are all checking how can we reduce our footprints in CO2, how can we be more sustainable. So all the companies are currently facing issues. So we can derive this into main 4 points, like, okay, how can a company reduce their cost? Yeah. So what are the main things that a company can do from procurement perspective to reduce the cost on these footprints? Then another point would be the risk. So what kind of vendors can we select that they are already complying in this sustainability world, and how can these vendors help us on our integration, on reducing everything that could affect to that? Another point I would say is the the reputation and the trust. So how can we, my company, be really good one and be trusted in this space so that we are following all the rules we need in terms of sustainability? And the last one I would say is the brand. So what can we as PwC help the company to support in this space in the procurement area? So all the things we've developed to support a company to evolve into this area.
Yeah, and you know, reputational risk is of course a huge issue today, and I know that CPOs, CIOs, and CFOs are seeing that on their agenda because I know it's affecting their bottom line, and we've seen a few stories in the news about that. And then, really, when we talk about procurement and making procurement sustainable, Jan, why don't you talk us through the process that PwC have gone through in order to capture that information?
Yeah. Actually, we decided to say, okay, how we can use the data by our ERP system, e-procurement system, systematically to figure out, okay, where we have ESG risk or ESG issues. So that doesn't mean that we only want to consider CO2 footprint. We want to see modern slavery. We want to see air pollution and so on and so forth. So all the ESG dimensions.
Right.
So what we said is, okay, we need 2 steps here. We need a top-down approach and a bottom-up approach to get rid of the complexity here. Sure. The one we did is that we say we combine the supplier database, which you have, where the region and the branch of the suppliers, and combine that with macroeconomic information, so that we are able to say, okay, there are suppliers where we have to really have a look on and where we have to focus on. And bottom up, we say, okay, how we can then, when we have a red flag supplier based on the macroeconomic data, how we can reduce red flag or reduce the impact by our activities and measures. And by that, we can use the POs and the ramp up of the volume, what we are doing with the suppliers. We can see, okay, how our footprint is increase or decrease on our activities we are done. So a procurement sustainable value in there, and what we generate and what we can measure structurally about the entire supplier base. Very important at the moment for the reason what Eva has said.
Right, and that's really insight driven, right? So it's using data, it's looking at the supply base, looking at what is the supply base being used for, how it's being used, taking external sources, to help measure them across different indicators.
Right.
Okay, cool. And what does that actually look like? I mean, when you look at taking that data, running that through the process that you guys built, how do you then benchmark that? How do you show that to an organization so that they understand the impacts and potentially where they need to focus?
Yeah, right. So for us, it's very important to do that on a systematic level, because the complexity of the supplier base is too big to do that by one. Then you have only a reactive situation. You can't react proactively on that, like we discussed with the procurement compliance campaign. So what we would like to do is, in the end, to bring all data in here. And for example, let me bring an example. Maybe it's the easiest way. When we, for example, have a cast manufacturer in China. Yeah, so and we know about the macroeconomic data. Okay, in this branch and this region in China, they use coal-fired power plants for the energy. Okay, then we have to say, okay, there is a specific CO2 footprint by the energy level there.
Yeah.
So the procurement guy goes into the sustainability tracker, put the button, all data come in, and we say, okay, hey, this cast manufacturer get a red flag on CO2 footprint, and we see that in a dashboard where he has a red dot where we can see it of the entire heat map of the world, and you figure out, okay, there we have to look definitely when we would like to trigger the CO2 target, we want to mitigate it. So if we then say, okay, this is a red flag, and we are going to the supplier, for example. So we decide we have to do a supplier audit, or we're using the PwC network and ask them to do a supplier audit for that. Yeah. When we go there and we figure out they have solar cells on the roof and they don't use the coal plant, then we can adjust this CO2 product of the supplier and reduce the red flag. So, and with this information from top down on the macroeconomic level, and from the information what we have internally there, we can create the right value of the suppliers. And with the structured top down approach, we are able to say, okay, this is the supplier we have to focus on, and not that one in Cologne. Yeah,
you can prioritize. You can prioritize based upon the data outputs, the insights.
And the important is you can do that over your entire supplier base.
Right.
So you don't have to wait for an analysis of 15,000 suppliers. That's not necessary anymore. You have it systematically available.
Okay. All right. And then in terms of the measurability of the suppliers, how does an organization understand overall? So let's say there's 15,000 suppliers. How does the system show them where are the risks that they have to mitigate? You know, how is that put together? Do you prioritize the vendors by classification? Do you have a tiered system?
Actually, what we are doing is we are setting values to the issues, so to say, or to the ESG risks and impacts. So we are aligned with our clients the value what they would like to assign to the pieces where you have to do that by hand, or where you have not indices or things like that, like you have on CO2, for example, so that we are able to say, okay, on all ESG risks, we say how big is the negative or positive value in the Gantt chart to describe, okay, where are the biggest issues, and then you can say, is it air pollution, is it modern slavery, or CO2, and then you can identify where you have the biggest issue. There's where we say, okay, you can focus on the right target for the ESG or sustainable value.
So you create your baseline. You create the baseline working with the customer to understand what their measures need to be. They get put into the system. You're then taking the data both from a vendor database and other sources, and then pulling those insights together so that they know exactly where they need to take action.
Yeah, absolutely right. Absolutely.
Okay. Cool. And so if I'm a prospect or a customer who's interested in doing this, how do you pull that together? How does that work in terms of how does PwC kind of manage that process? Because this isn't a small thing, right? You're trying to do this in one big bang is quite a lot of work. So do you break this up? What does that process look like?
Yeah. So yes, we are talking about three phases at that piece. So the first phase is that we bring the supplier master data together with the macroeconomic data and create, so to say, the first footprint of the values. This is where we say, okay, this is where we have a first starting point where we can work with. The second piece is to be beyond all ESG risks, so that we can say, okay, we're bringing values to all of the ESG risk and do the baselining, so to say, where we say, okay, this is the values or negative impact what a supplier is doing, so that we are really have a possibility to measure and the improvement and the mitigation and say, okay, what is the procurement sustainable value, what we can generate with our initiatives. And the last point is then to start to work on structured mitigation workflows, so to say, so that you can start supplier audits, that you can improve your RFQ and awarding documents in, for example, Ariba sourcing. There's okay, how you have to evaluate the criteria to choose a supplier. So this is then the third phase where we bring the sustainability into the tool itself, that you can run every time with the more exact values step by step. And so longer you take this tool into your consideration and you start to improve your flags and values, you get more and more micro data in there, which gives you a better transparency about that. So 3 phases from the first footprint to the total ESG values to the workflows.
Okay, and then, I mean, have you got an example of, a customer that you've done this in before?
Yes, we did the sustainability piece for several years so, and we have services where we do that for one-time effect. So that we say, okay, we take a point in time, take the data, or bring the macro data, bring the analysis back, and they have to work with that. So only the first phase, so to say, on the Excel level. So we decided now 2 years ago, to bring that on a app level, on a cloud-based piece of technology, where we can do this continuously and which we can integrate into the e-procurement systems. So what we have done in the end is we created an asset out of our service and use it now continuously on our clients to improve the value of our service.
And how has this helped in your, just thinking about this from a CPO's perspective, right? I mean, given that this has become such a big piece and for all the right reasons, like I said earlier, what are CPOs seeing as a result of this? Are they beginning to feel like they're being able to use this to drive themselves in the right direction? Give us some thoughts around that, because I know that you're talking to CPOs on a regular basis around this.
Actually, the CPOs try to create their procurement strategy out of the company strategy, the company-wide strategy, and more and more companies create or have their sustainability as one of very important piece of their further strategy for the next 5, 10, 15 years. For example, the automotive industry, they would like to reduce the carbon footprint very heavily, which is regulatory driven. So what happens? They say, okay, we have to consider our production, what we can do, and how we can reduce the CO2 footprint. But then they recognize the most CO2 footprint or other ESG risks coming out of the supplier base. Because when you look into the entire N-tier supplier base, there is the biggest issue on that such ESG risk. When we're talking about the Lieferketten, which is coming up in Germany, then we need more and more transparency on such risks. Where is the CEO, or who is this, the CEO asking? Hey, CPO, you have the access to the supplier base. Please clarify my topic on CO2 footprint or modern slavery or Lieferketten. Then the CPO has a target and say, okay, where should I start? Okay, let us discuss about supplier audits. But then you have only a small piece of it, and you need a structured approach to answer that question in the right manner. And I guess we have the solution for that.
So this allows them to be more proactive rather than reactive, right? In terms
absolutely right. Absolutely.
Okay.
But in the end, it's heavily driven out of the targets what companies have in the moment. And sustainability is one of the first 3 places. I'm not sure where the CEO ranked that in the moment, but this is something which is driven by the company itself.
And just thinking about then the insights that you get from this, right? Is there reporting available? I mean, you know, because if you think about it today, almost every company video that I see now has some kind of sustainability metric that they throw in, because I mean, it's an important piece. So does this provide the reporting for that kind of data?
Yeah, big advantage actually. You can create trust by transparency in the end. You can directly say, okay, we are measuring all the ESG risks, like I mentioned that, the CO2 footprint, air pollution, etc., where you have the possibility to say which value do you have generated on each level. And so you can transparently show how you get the improvement by values and by real reports on what you have done by your workflow. So more transparency is not possible, I guess, in the moment.
Sure. No, that's great. And thank you for that. I think we've got some good background as to what it, you know, what the tool does. And for the audience, you know, given how important this subject is, if you're really looking at this today and you're having to try and pull this manually or on an annual basis, and you're having to pull data to try and do this yourselves, this is a solution that can really help you and really put sustainability at the forefront of what you do, and without you having to pull that all manually or build anything separately. So thank you very much, Jan and Eva, for the overview. And yeah, please do reach out to us if you want any further information. Thank you both for joining, and yeah, we'll be coming back with some other videos with you and in the future.
Yeah, you're welcome, and was a pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you, Eva.
Thank you, Jan.
Thank you.
Damit hast du es eigentlich